and welcome to episode 50 of Every SNES RPG. Now, I'm aware that milestones really only matter to the person making the show and not so much to the audience. To you, this is just another episode, but to me, it's a huge milestone. When I started this, did I think I was gonna make it all the way to 50 episodes? I mean, in my wildest dreams, I think I hoped that I would stick with it for long enough to get this far. But realistically speaking, I probably wouldn't have predicted it. And at the rate I'm going, I'm not gonna reach episode 100 until 2030. So this is my opportunity to have a big milestone, I guess, for a long time. Did you know that when I started this show, I didn't even have a Super Nintendo? This one right here was donated by an anonymous person on Reddit when I just said that I didn't have one. So, thank you so much to them. I don't even think they know about my YouTube channel. It had nothing to do with that. I would just mention that I didn't have one, and they're like, oh, I have one, you could have it. Which was so nice. Of course, I've owned Super Nintendos at other points throughout my life. I had both models, as you can see in this ancient video I dug up, but I had to sell both of them just because I needed money. Now, I've made it pretty clear in other videos that I think that the first, 20 or so episodes of every SNES RPG are fucking hot garbage, and I hate them, and I wish that they didn't exist, and I would have taken them off of my channel a long time ago if they weren't connected to the series. It's like, a lot of times people will say that they just discovered my channel, and I ask them, hey, what did you watch? And then they'll answer back, oh, I just saw your Final Fantasy II video, and it makes me fucking die a little on the inside. Like, that's not what I want to hear, man. I had 100 subscribers when I was making those, and it shows. That's the quality they have. So I say that I hate them all the time, but I've never really made it clear why I hate them. And I'm gonna take an opportunity here to just clear the air.
Hi, I'm Jason Graves, and never trust anyone who needs a haircut.
I'm putting on this stupid voice, and they have this weird background thing going on, which I only did because Tim Rogers did it, but I don't have anywhere near the talent he does, so it just ended up looking like shit. But it's not so much the technical aspects that I dislike so much about my older videos. It's more the fact that they're just kind of generic or basic, or they take talking points from other videos or articles online like Hardcore Gaming 101, and they just kind of incorporate them into the video, even if it's not like part of my MO or something that I would normally bring up. If you want my one piece of YouTube advice unsolicited, it is that you should always offer something to your audience. Give them something that they will not get anywhere else, and you're golden. I see so many game review channels where they're competently made and the scripts are even like good, and they might even have some decent insight into what they're talking about. But if you're talking about the same games, making the same general points, then nobody's gonna care. There's no reason to watch my Final Fantasy 2/4 video when Jeremy Parrish's exists on the same space, and it's just a better version of what I was trying to do anyway.
This is Draken, and it contains a poem. Not literally, this is text that appears in the game. I just printed it to a piece of paper, but allow me to read this poem to you.
What do I mean by that? What are some specific examples? Well, this whole poem intro from the original Draken video. I still have the poem, it's still in there. It's bullshit.
That was supposed to be the famous Emily Dickinson poem, The Wind's Visit.
That's just some shit I read online. I remember I even tried to corroborate it by finding the dialogue in the game and translating it myself, but I couldn't even find the dialogue it was supposed to be referring to. So, it's like nonsense. It's just some shit that I found online and I put it in my video. There's another part where I'm talking about the 3D overworld.
This is a unique 3D, first-person, open-world RPG. And, unless I'm mistaken, the effect isn't achieved with Mode 7.
Unless I'm mistaken? Where the fuck do I get off saying that? I'm not a Super Nintendo engineer. I don't know the first thing about making Super Nintendo games. I wouldn't know Mode 7 from a mode in my ass. So, like, what the hell am I talking about? It was just some crap that I read online and I felt the need to put it in my video. And it makes me fucking sick that I did shit like that. These early episodes don't feel like me, they feel like someone doing a bad Tim Rogers impersonation. Even this.
Don't trust a guy who needs a haircut.
Yeah, that's just something Tim Rogers said, and I ran with it. In fact, what am I doing wearing sunglasses? That's another Tim Rogers thing. I couldn't even put on regular glasses for these things. I can't see a damn thing without glasses, so I pretty much need them if I'm going to have a teleprompter or something, which most of the time I need them. Episode 2, Final Fantasy 2/4, really makes me sick. Just from the bottom of my stomach, I want to fucking puke whenever I think about that one. Because it's just some cookie cutter nonsense. It's just a bunch of talking points that have already been made that I'm regurgitating. I'm trying to sound like a fucking video game professor, trying to explain like the intricacies behind the design, where it's like half of that shit I didn't even come up with. And it makes me fucking sick. Like, I'm talking about Formula 1 cars. What the fuck do I know about Formula 1 cars? And then episode 3, Lagoon. This one is not so much that it's derivative, it's more that it's such a missed opportunity. Lagoon is like Tommy Wiseau's The Room equivalent of the Super Nintendo library. This game is so fucking funny, and I only scratched the surface of it. But you know what? We're gonna fix that right now. Because I'm re-reviewing Lagoon. Lagoon is such an interesting specimen. It was an early Super Nintendo game, so it's fairly well known, at least compared to plenty of other games that I've reviewed. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to call it a cult classic, but there are a cohort of both ironic and unironic fans. It's cheap, so I have it complete in box. Wait, the 3D action fantasy? What? What about this is 3D? The fact that you can walk up and down and not just left and right? Using this definition, was the original Zelda 3D? The back is strange too. Lakeland has a drinking problem. What is this, a quest to go to our AA meeting? All the water has been fouled, and it's up to you to find out why. What am I, a sanitation worker? What does the manual say? Matthias spoke hauntingly. It is for this day that I trained you. You must discover what evil force possesses and fouls the water. I'm over here imagining an adventure with one of those little pH water analysis kits. Or like I'm gonna go to the village elder's house to install a water softener or something. Did Mario ever have to solve a water crisis? I mean, hey, I do have a few years plumbing experience. Maybe this is the right adventure for me. The back of the manual advertises this hint book, which I couldn't find any scans for online. Here's some asshole on eBay asking $200 for it, and unfortunately that's the only listing, so they set the market price. If you have this, please scan it so the world can see, or perhaps play along with it. Not that Lagoon really requires a walkthrough because this game is not complex by any means, but you know, if I had the option, I like playing games with old guides. As soon as you power this game on, you're blasted with inarguably, by far, the best part about Lagoon. This soundtrack will make your dick explode. I could run through a wall listening to this. The track is so good that it's actually longer than the opening animation. Cutscene loops before the song does because they knew that they couldn't cut it off early. I wish the game kept up that energy after it started. I can't wait to play the game. You get talked at by some old man about the muddy water, then you're left to aimlessly wander around this drab town area. The first thing you'll notice is that you can't go inside most buildings, and the ones in which you can are not telegraphed at all. Some doors you can go in, some you can't. Some open areas you can go in, others you can't. It's just a crapshoot. You'll talk to some NPCs, like this woman who calls her boyfriend a gold digger. Well, I guess Lagoon's not one for gender stereotypes. Men can be gold diggers too. You go to this place of faith where this woman is a huge asshole to you. What do you want? Go home! You ever go to a church where a nun accosts you? What are you doing here? We're closed. Go away. The dialogue in this game is downright hilarious sometimes. We're inside a church with this peaceful music playing. Oh, by the way, I just mentioned to the cleric that the water is getting muddy, when suddenly, BLAM! It starts blasting these ear-wrenching, clashing sounds. The game's soundtrack is going crazy. There's a problem! What? What's so noisy? Like, no, dude, that's not him. That's the game! Holy shit, it's going so hard! Then you get teleported to this screen where nobody moves. That's a surefire way to know if a game was rushed, cheaply made, hastily slapped together. The number of times you encounter a supposedly tense scene where there's absolutely no screen movement whatsoever. A good game would have this guy running back and forth in a panic, somebody checking up on this guy laying on the ground. There would at least be facial expressions. And when paired with this ridiculously hard track, I can't help but laugh at this whole situation. It gets funnier too, because after this, the game makes you go back to town to wander around some more before it finally lets you into the first dungeon. Of course, not before some more hilarious dialogue. You, the champion of light, seem to be the only one who can get into the cave. Please, put these on and get ready to go. You get 300 gold. I like to imagine our hero then fastened those 300 gold pieces into a suit of armor, like the armor of the Glorious or something in Dark Souls 1. So after about 20 minutes of dicking around, we finally get to kill some things. That is, if you can master the most worthless gosh darn sword in video game history. This will forever be one of the most baffling decisions I have ever seen. Why did they make it so short? I mean, I know it's called the short sword, but it's not as if you ever get a longer one. The short sword is just upfront about it. You should always try to hit enemies from the side, because at least then you can tell what the range is on this thing. If I face down, look at this. It looks like the sword doesn't even leave my body. Oh man, is this not the most intense fight you've ever seen in your life? From here, the game makes you do this starting dungeon 3 separate times. One to rescue this kid, another is the slowest escort quest of all time to bring him back. And no, you can't just leave him behind. I tried. He gets stuck on shit too, like in Secret of Mana. Jesus, could he walk any slower? Luckily, he doesn't take any damage, so all he really does is waste your time. And it's not like this first cave is tiny either. I mean, it's not huge, but it's as complex as any other dungeon outside the last couple in this game. There's multiple floors, plenty of dead ends, and little in the way of landmarks to make a mental map of. After saving the kid, you go back through to get to the other side, this time fighting a boss. And it's here a first-time player will fully realize just how awful your sword is, because you need to be straight up a boss's giant gaping asshole to have a chance of hitting him in this game. And no, you can't just hit this guy from the side. It needs to be head on, dead the fuck on. Luckily, I'm an expert, so I took him out quick. After that, this game's structure reveals itself. The whole game is like one giant hallway. Final hallway 13, watch your back because Lagoon did it first. You get to a town, you do a dungeon, there's a point of no return. In this case, an earthquake causes the cave you just came from to become inaccessible. Then you get to a new town, do another dungeon, get to another new town, do another dungeon, repeat until the game is all out of towns and dungeons. It's very un-RPG-like, actually, and functions more like a traditionally stage-based game, even if there aren't actual formal stages. The multiple points of no return are another trick cheaply made games will employ because it makes them easier to test by controlling more of the environment the player is able to interact with. Since I can't walk back to the first town from the end of the game, they don't have to worry about a player having endgame shit all the way back there. It also probably had something to do with memory management or something, because after you've progressed to a certain point, the game can just forget that earlier chunks of itself exist. The second town is another choice batch of NPCs. A legend states that every 1,000 years, when sunlight hits the castle, it is put to sleep for 1 year. Excuse me, what? Is he trying to say that sunlight only hits the castle once every 1,000 years? And how do you put a castle to sleep? It's not alive. And what makes a castle asleep as opposed to awake? Unfortunately, the castle was put to sleep with our friends trapped inside. Again, what? Your quest for this leg of the game is to go inside the castle to rescue this guy's friends. Fair enough, but what the fuck kind of a description is this? With sleeping castles and every 1,000 years, sunlight hits the castle? Okay. It'll really help if you have the shiny ball from the weapon shop. Oh, thanks for the tip, lady. Sure, let's go check it out. What? 10,000 gold? Well, I mean, I guess you as an audience member have no frame of reference, but believe me, that's a ludicrous number. Let me explain how stupid this is. If I leave town and kill the monsters in the surrounding area, I only receive 3 gold each, meaning that in order to afford the shiny ball, I would have to kill 3,333.3 repeating of these spiders. Or I guess it's a little less because I already have 290 gold, but there was no point in this entire game where I had anywhere close to 10,000 gold, let alone while I still had access to this area, because remember, this game is a lot of points of no return. You can't come back for it at the end of the game, for instance, where grinding for 10,000 gold might have actually been realistic. The boss of the sleeping castle is a real asshole. Yeah, a real castle in my asshole. And where 90% of kids probably gave up and returned the game to Blockbuster. Unless you're PJ speedrunning this game at GDQ 2012. Legendary video, by the way. I think this might be my favorite GDQ run of all time. Give it a watch if you can. Unless you're him, you're going to be underleveled. Fighting in this game isn't so much about strategy or finesse or action. It's about finding the one magic pixel where you're actually able to hit them. Then you mash that attack button as hard as you possibly can. Then hope your level is high enough to do enough damage to actually kill them before they kill you. And the music here fucking slays. Not that it ever doesn't, but the boss theme makes me feel like I downed 3 cans of Monster and then chased it down by snorting a line of smashed up Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Die, Peter Griffin, die! Arrgh! Got him. Hell yeah. Every boss fight in this game is a high intensity, high testosterone mash fest, on par with any Mario Party game. You're going to get blistered thumbs. Rest in peace, that guy with the glasses.com, playing this. Then the cycle repeats again. We pretty much know the deal at this point. New town, new dungeon, new baffling quest. This time there are some rocks apparently blocking the entrance to the next cave, and we have to do a little fetch quest inside town so we can obtain a mirror to break the rocks. Not that it matters structurally or really at all in the grand scheme of things, but why a mirror? Like, this object could have been anything, right? You would think that something like a hammer to smash rocks would make more sense. Was this planned out ahead of time, or did they just use whatever sprites they had laying around? Was there a design document somewhere in the Chemco offices specifying that the player is going to use a gosh darn mirror to smash these rocks? Then I get to the entrance of the cave, and the rocks are a lot smaller than I expected. Really, we couldn't have just squeezed through here? Alright, here goes nothing. Let's use our mirror to get rid of these rocks. Well, what did I expect? This game barely has animations. Like when this guy says, "I'm leaving, goodbye," then one frame he's here, the next he's not. There's a lot of sudden vanishing going on in Lagoon with no animations. Another sure sign of a game stressed for time. You would think that they would at least make the water brown or something, right? But whenever there's water in this game, it looks fine. It doesn't look muddy at all. The game forgets about your water quest halfway through anyway, in favor of a rescue the princess plot twist. And of course, in typical Lagoon fashion, it's conveyed to you in the absolute most bizarre way possible. So you walk into this cave, see a princess, who then tells you that she needs to be rescued from Lagoon Castle. Why? You're standing right in front of me. This isn't like a hologram. This is actually her. Princess, are you predicting to me that in the future you're going to be kidnapped and will then be in need of a savior? What, like, game, you had one job. The only character who isn't supposed to tell you to rescue the princess is the princess. Unless it's telepathy, like at the beginning of A Link to the Past or something. This is more like the joke in Link's Awakening with the guy who tells you that he's gonna be lost in the mountains later. Except, I don't know if this was supposed to be a joke. I mean, it's funny anyway, and that's a key element of so bad it's gooddom. Were the people who made, or at least localized Lagoon aware? Were they in on the joke? Why else would the box call this game 3D? Or why would they have an NPC outside of a store telling you to spend hours of your life killing 3,000 spiders so I can afford a shiny ball? It's a ball! Who the fuck cares about a ball? Of course I have to bring up the fucked perspective in these two infamous scenes where you're in this stage jumping from cloud to cloud, then you have to jump on this land which is clearly not on the same plane as you. I guess there's no fall damage in Lagoon, except for when you jump down a bottomless pit, because then there is. Then there's this other time where you need to leap on this little green speck, which is clearly in the background to move on to the next area. The leveling is strange too, because there's no indication when you level up, you just have to check the menu every so often. And there's so many other little idiosyncrasies I could think of. You could hyper-analyze almost any random screen grab from this to find something strange. We have this classic cutscene. That was ridiculous. Do I even need to say anything? And when it's over, they're just motionless on the ground. I don't know why, but the fact that there's no motion in this game will never not be funny to me. Oh, and I almost forgot about the magic. That's one of the most bizarre parts of the whole game. You get these wands and elemental crystals, which allow you to shoot magic blasts at your enemies. Pretty cool, right? But for absolutely no reason, that is explained in the game anyway, they disabled magic against every boss. You can't even shoot a fireball anymore. The game forces you to only use melee attacks. There's not even like a bullshit story reason. It's transparently just to make the game more difficult. Why have magic at all if you're not allowed to use it against bosses? I guess it helps with grinding a little bit, but man. To conclude, Lagoon is a pile of shit. But you can save anywhere. As cheap as it is, it's incredibly forgiving. It's short. My original run only took me 10 hours, 38 minutes. In proof that I have gotten better at video games, this run only took me 8:55. So I say, fuck it, play Lagoon. I recommend it. It's funny. It's a funny game. The final boss, or should I say bosses, are kind of nonsense because you have to beat 6 of them in a row. None of them are particularly difficult, but you're not allowed to save in between them, and with how finicky this game is, winning 6 times in a row is easier said than done. Once you do it, the ending doesn't even mention the water. You remember what the start of this game went out of its way to make a huge stink about? What the back of the box dubbed a drinking problem? No? Nobody cares about the muddy water? Alright. Wow, that was a lot better than my original Lagoon video, wasn't it? In the spirit of atoning for the past sins that I've made in prior videos, I've decided that I'm going to do the top 10 times that I fucked up in an every SNES RPG. Now, before I get to those, I have a few honorable mentions from fuck-ups that are not from every SNES RPG, such as the time I called that guy a NASCAR driver, or I said he wasn't a NASCAR driver. I forget what it was. In my top 100 NES video list, I talk about a racing game, and I say that the guy didn't even drive for the sport that the game was about, despite the fact that he was a NASCAR driver, and this is a Formula 1 game. That was just patently false, and I have no idea where I got it. Embarrassing mistake. I've got 2 from every SNES RPG episodes that I'm going to defend. The first one just happened. In the Tactics Ogre video, I state that the final boss of the game is the protagonist from the game before it, only to have a whole host of comments, a whole bunch of people making fun of me for saying that, and I'm doubling down right here, I'm tripling down. I still think that it's a valid read on the situation, because in the game, there is a vaguely outlined king who united the whole kingdom together, right? He went on this, like, holy war. Basically, they just described the events of what happened in the first game, and this ancient king did all that stuff, and that's who gets resurrected, and that's who you fight at the end. Clearly, the subtext being that, you know, the adventure from the first game led to what's going on in Tactics Ogre. Even if there are, like, the names are different, or something in the remake says specifically that it's some other guy. Somebody said that in the Game Boy, that it's actually the protagonist from the Game Boy Advance game. Like, even if this shit gets, like, retconned later, I stand by my read on this whole game. Okay, and the next one that people give me shit for, but that I'm gonna defend, is in my Lord of the Rings video. I make a big deal about how they're not rotoscoped, and in my defense, I should have and could have used better examples. I think I used NBA Jam and Pit Fighter as my examples. I used games that, like, aren't rotoscoped. I used, like, the games where they have real-life actors, but they digitize the sprites and put them into the game. Sounds an awful lot like what they did with, I don't know, Mortal Kombat or NBA Jam, taking real actors, then using still images from that to craft in-game graphics. What makes this rotoscope? What's the difference? That they drew over the footage before making them into sprites? There were better examples of rotoscoping than those that I should have used, but people have clapped back at me, citing a Nintendo Power interview where they actually go over the process of rotoscoping, and I looked up those issues of Nintendo Power, and there's nothing, man. I looked at them. The only thing Nintendo Power does is it gives, like, a soft guide to get through the game. There's no mention of the development. There's no, like, interviews. There's nothing like that. It's just, like, a soft guide to get through, like, half the game. That's all I saw when I went and I looked up the Nintendo Power. Alright, the number 10 fuck-up in every SNES RPG history was when I got George and John Romero confused in my Breath of Fire video. There's this town called Romero, like John Romero, and they're having a zombie outbreak. I've actually gotten a whole new wave of people commenting and correcting me on this one because I just put out a compilation where Breath of Fire was one of the videos in it. But in it, I state that the inspiration for the zombie town was from John Romero, when John Romero's the guy who made Doom. He's not the guy who made Night of the Living Dead. It's George Romero. I meant to say George Romero. I got them mixed up. I'm sorry. Number 9, Crazy Bread and Normal Bread in Final Fantasy III. Okay, so this was just like a dumb joke. I say that there's nowhere in the game that they mention being named the normal world and the World of Ruin. World of Order and World of Ruin? Whatever they call the worlds in Final Fantasy VI. And a lot of people corrected me. They don't say it in the game, but they say it in the manual. And the original game included maps of both worlds, and they were labeled there. So, in the supporting materials included with the game, they make it clear what the names of the worlds are. My mistake, even though that was just a joke. Fans like to refer to these parts as the World of Balance and the World of Ruin. I have no idea where these terms come from. I'm pretty sure nobody in the game says either one, so I'm gonna call them Wonder Bread and Crazy Bread from here on out. Number 8. Yes, you can heal the robot in Paladin's Quest. So in Paladin's Quest, I make a big deal about this robot party member that you can get, and I thought it was genius because he starts with a shitload of HP, and I thought the gimmick was that he's only in your party as long as he's still alive, and there's no way to heal him. He's super strong and just generally overpowered. The drawback? Well, he's a robot, so he can't drink medicine, he can't go to sleep. In fact, you can't prepare him at all. When he loses HP, it's permanent. You are allowed to have this cool, OP as heck automaton in your party for exactly as long as his hit points last. Then he's gone forever. But, as has been pointed out to me, a couple things actually. One, it actually is possible to heal him. You just don't do it through normal means like you do with the rest of the party. And two, if he dies, apparently you can actually just go back to where you recruited him to get him again. So, yeah, you can heal the robot in Paladin's Quest. I'm sorry. Number 7, in my Arcana review, I make fun of a phrasing. It says an historic land, and I make fun of that as if it's grammatically incorrect, when in fact, you can use either an or a in that situation. It's not incorrect for either one. For heaven's sake, the first line of the game contains a typo. This is an historic land? This is a case where I think I get the overall point right, but the example I used was very poor, and I should have just found a better one. The phrasing in Arcana is very strange. The translation's not the best, and there's a lot of weird English in the game, but I was really lazy back then, so when I was looking for examples of this, all I did was just look at the intro, and I found the first thing I saw I ran with, even though it wasn't a very good example. Number 6 fuck up is the time that I played Fire Emblem 3 so poorly and so shittily, and I avoided the side quest to get the fucking MacGuffin sword. that I had to restart the entire game once I got to the final boss of Book 1. Yeah, I mean, that's on me. I mean, half the video is, like, me raging over that, right? But, you know, it's been enough time. I can look back and laugh. I was a fucking buffoon doing it that way. I should have paid closer attention to the game up until then. But I didn't, so... yeah, whatever. You live and learn. I played the other Fire Emblem games better. Number 5 fuck up was not figuring out how to use magic in Eye of the Beholder, because the final boss is apparently only supposed to be harmed by magic, or at least that's how you're supposed to beat him. You're supposed to just, like, cast a bunch of spells at him. I think there's, like, another way to trap him, too. There's, like, you can lure him into a trap and he dies that way. Though I might be thinking of Dungeon Master. I might be getting my 2 dungeon crawlers confused. But the way I did it was I just meleeed him. Like, what I did was, he's in this room, right? I ran in, I hit him once, and then I ran back. And then I ran in, and I hit him once, and then I ran back. And I did that over and over again. I probably had to hit him hundreds of times before he died. But he did die eventually, and that's how I beat Eye of the Beholder. It's really fucked up that I didn't even, like, mention that in the video. I left a lot of stuff out, I guess, in that one, because... like, that's a huge part of the game, right? Like, that might be worth mentioning. The fact that I had to fucking chip damage the final boss to death using a method that's, like, definitely not intended. That's pretty funny, but, like, I didn't even bring it up. The number 4 fuck up is my entire Evo the Search for Eden and my entire Final Fantasy V videos. So, I'm not a fan of a lot of my older videos, but the only 2 that I'm, like, downright embarrassed that I made are my Evo and my Final Fantasy V ones. Now, I'm not going to re-review them or anything. This Lagoon was, like, a one-time deal. I'm not doing that again, because I think re-reviewing your old stuff is lame. Even if you can go back and do it much better, I want to resist the urge to do that. But just know that I don't stand by those 2 videos at all anymore. I think they're a step below even my worst stuff. They're just awful. Number 3 is being born too late to properly be able to talk about games from the early 90s. So this is a comment that I get sometimes, or I'll get sentiments about that. A lot of times in my list videos, and they're not aware of my larger body of work, all they've seen is, like, my list video. Like, if they'll watch my Super Nintendo video, they'll see that I put Star Fox at, like, number 98, and then leave a comment calling me a Gen Z loser, and then leave. It's like, oh, you don't even know what a fucking anything is. This just looks like somebody who played, like, a ROM, and that's what they thought. And, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I don't like Star Fox, so I haven't gotten very far into the game. Maybe you're right, maybe it gets great later on, but... like, man, I grew up with retro games. I grew up watching retro game YouTube. Shit. That's, like, I guess how young I am. I discovered it when I was, like, an early teen, like, preteen, I guess. But, like, I grew up around all this shit. I mean, I think anybody has the authority to talk about whatever they want. And at this point, I've reviewed so many damn games. I think it's funny that even recently I got a comment on my top 100 NES games list. It might have been like 6 months or a year ago now, but I got a comment once that I just thought was really funny because I put the original Final Fantasy super low on that list, and it was just him accusing me of, like, not being used to, like, old RPGs or something, and I'm just like, man, if, like, fucking, I have a whole channel centered around talking about old RPGs. I've probably played fucking 10 times more than you have, random person commenting. So, like, saying that I don't understand, like, the deal with old RPGs, and that's why I put Final Fantasy so low on that list. It's stupid. I mean, it's stupid even if you look at the rest of the list, because I put the Dragon Warrior games so high. Number 2 is the time that I personally went into the past and stomped on your childhood. It's whenever I have a negative review on a game, there will always be people who defend it because they played it when they were a kid and they have fond memories of playing it when they were a kid. Just because I didn't like a game, it doesn't invalidate your childhood. It doesn't invalidate that you like the game. You're allowed to like anything that you want. It doesn't matter what I say. I have no real, I'm just a nobody. Like, who cares what I think? What happens is a lot of people are only familiar with, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 SNES RPGs. So they find my channel and then they click on one of those games that they're familiar with, because they're only familiar with a few. And then if I'm not like head and heels in love with it like they are, then they'll leave a comment saying like I don't get it, which sure, I don't get a lot of things, so maybe. But at the same time, man, it's like you're not invalid. You can think whatever you want. And my number one fuck up of all time in every SNES RPG. This one's a big one. In Lufia 2, it's big because I fucked it up twice. In my Lufia 2 video, I didn't even mention the Ancient Cave. It's called the Ancient Cave. I didn't even mention the Ancient Cave. It's an area where you go in and you're reset to level 1, and it's like a roguelike built in. It's like a full game built within a game. It's pretty cool. I didn't do it in my playthrough. I think I went in there one time, I saw what it was about, and I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. No time. I have no time to do that. So I didn't. And then I didn't even bring it up in the video. And people rightly pointed out that that's fucked up because that's a big part of the game. And gosh darn it, you're right. And I agreed. So in my top 100 Super Nintendo list, when I got to Lufia 2, instead of talking about the game at whole, I decided I was going to spend the whole segment just talking about the Ancient Cave. So in my review of this game, I neglected to even mention the Tower of Sacrifice. But I fucked it up because I called it the Tower of Sacrifice. And when I looked up footage, I didn't capture my own footage for that segment. When I looked up footage to put in that part, I took footage from the Ancient Cave. And the story gets even worse because I remember when I was editing it, I was actually confused because what I was seeing didn't line up with what I thought the area was. I'm like, hey, it doesn't seem like you went back to level 1 in here. Oh well, I'll just put the footage in. So I saw it was wrong, and I put it in anyway. So a while back I saw this thread on r/SNES that was just titled, Worst RPG on SNES, and then it shows a picture of the Draken box art. Now when I reviewed it originally, obviously I had much less perspective than I do now, but I still pretty much nailed the thesis on that.
As I move forward, I'm willing to bet that most of the games I play are going to be more user-friendly, but I'm not sure they're going to be more unique than Draken.
Draken wasn't necessarily good or bad. It's just kind of this strange creature which exists in its own pocket realm, separated from reality itself. What I mean to say is that this game is fucking weird. An all-time game you just kind of try out because of the cool box art or title. Then after powering it on, you're overwhelmed with a sense of, excuse me, what the fuck is this? It's instantly non-intuitive. You're left to wander this big, confusing 3D world with random encounters. Then when you get into a fight, 4 characters shuffle in from behind the camera, and you have absolutely no control over what they're doing. There are seemingly no other humans anywhere else in sight, but these giant dragons will chat your ear off. I'd be willing to bet that the vast majority of people who played this got nowhere. And I can't blame them. It's so much to take in. You're either fine-tuned to want to learn it, or you're a kid in 1991 and you'd just rather play Mario. Draken was one of the first Super Nintendo games. It was one of the most famous early Game Grumps episodes. It was never expensive, so it made its way into a lot of people's collections. It has a weird name that people perusing ROM lists might want to try out. So this game got around. People have been made aware of Draken. The game has a certain negative reputation, but it's definitely not the worst RPG on the system. Not even close. Which brings us, finally, to the alleged topic of this very video. Dragon View exists almost as a trivia point. Whenever Draken comes up, somebody will go, hey, you know they made a sequel to Draken? Yeah, that weird game with the cat head? And then that's the only context that Dragon View ever comes up in. That's the significance, by the way. Episode 1 of every SNES RPG was Draken. Episode 50 is its sequel, Dragon View. This is a game that costs well over $100 if you wanted to buy it. This right here in my hands is a limited run reprint, which is something that I had no idea limited run did until I saw this. Reproduction cartridges are a dime a dozen, but it's interesting to me when a company goes out of its way to do things legitimately. This isn't a bootleg. They acquired a license to reissue this game, which is something I'm a little surprised we don't see any more of. As for what you get, the cartridge is fluorescent green, there's a trading card, and a recreation of the manual, which is a little disappointing because Dragon View's manual sucked. It would have been nice to see Limited Run go above and beyond, maybe make a new manual, include some other things, because they have plenty of sets which do, but I understand wanting to present the game as it originally was as well. This is the cartridge I used for the video, and I'm pretty sure the only difference is the splash screen, which instead of saying Chemco, now says Limited Run. Rather shittily, might I add. There's weird artifacting left, almost like they used the Photoshop magic wand tool, but didn't bother to erase the leftover bits. Alright, enough all this shit. Am I finally ready to talk about the stupid game? After what, 40 minutes of beating around the bush? Well, this is gonna be incredibly anticlimactic because Dragon View is... it's alright. I hesitate to call it a hidden gem or anything, but it's a fun time and a competently made game. Before delving into the game itself, I just want to say that visually having the UI take up half the screen was certainly a choice. Dragon View is a handsome game, it's just a handsome game which only takes up half the screen. On paper, it's incredibly similar to Draken. 3D overworld, 2D side view dungeons, but the overall game experience couldn't be much more different. For starters, they smartly didn't place you on the overworld when the game begins, instead opting for your adventure to begin in town, with other human NPCs. And right away I noticed something really strange. The text in this game is written as if it's in a novel, as in it will describe emotions or facial expressions or actions. Here's the first dialogue box in the game. Haha, good! Damn exclaims. Then in the next one, he jives, then chuckles, then your jaw drops and your smile fades. It's a little weird, right? Like there's some off-screen narrator, and I can't think of another game which does this in just regular text boxes. Maybe something like in Shadowrun Genesis where there are long, detailed descriptions of imagery of like things around you. Dragon View isn't what I would call a dialogue-heavy game, but it's all presented in this way. Obviously, it would be preferable for the characters to visually emote instead of describing it like this, but it's cute. The story is dog simple. The bad guy steals your girl, go get her back. And that's about it. There are some finer details about opening up the underworld to summon a god of death or something. You know, typical stuff. But you're on a quest to rescue your girlfriend. That's the beating heart. Dragon View uses Breath of the Wild principles to structure itself. You start off in this small, quarantined off tutorial area where you'll do the first dungeon and fight the first boss before being set free and left to explore at your own pace. It's wide open, but only in theory. In another drastic departure from Draken, battles are now side-scrolling action-based. Though action is a bit of an illusion, because it really has almost nothing to do with player skill and has more to do with your stats and level. If you're too low level, you simply won't deal enough damage to defeat enemies, which now that I think about it is a problem Breath of the Wild has as well. But it's much more pronounced here. If you wander into the wrong area, Dragon View makes sure that you will die swiftly and painfully. This results in a game which is technically non-linear, as in you could theoretically accomplish most of the main tasks in any order, but in practice isn't. For example, if you try to conquer the swamp or desert areas first, you're gonna have a bad time. Oh yeah, and remember to save also, because dying in this game kicks you back to the main menu. You can only save in towns, so it's a little unforgiving in that way. There's nothing more frustrating than losing to an area boss, because it means that you're forced to go through the entire dungeon again from the beginning with none of your progress saved. You know, for a game that nobody talks about in Dragon View, it's oodles of fun, and I think the game has decent normie appeal, to the point where I'm surprised that it hasn't gained hardly any traction in the retro gaming community. It's a lot like Ys 3 if I had to compare it to one other game. That is, if the connecting areas were a non-linear 3D overworld. Game's certainly much more palatable than Draken anyway. It's easy to understand your objectives. There are 4 main dungeons. Again, much like Breath of the Wild. Do them. Then a 5th opens up where you finish the game. There's no random battles. Well, there are, but there are these clouds scattered around the overworld which you can easily avoid. A couple of the quests are a little esoteric, such as the part where you have to grind these random encounters until you find a special golden sandworm, which drops a MacGuffin that you need to get into the desert dungeon. It's totally random, but I actually had to do this twice because I forgot to save after the first time and died. Both times it didn't take more than 10 minutes to get this encounter, so it wasn't that bad. Here's a side quest that presents a universal gamer dilemma, or UGD. There's a man in a cave who promises you something really cool if you can kill 100 enemies. Now I think what you do here says a lot about you as a person. Do you A, stop what you're doing and grind the 100 monsters, or do you B, let it happen naturally and then come back later on to claim your reward? I stopped what I was doing and ground out the 100 monsters. The prize ended up being this game's equivalent to a heart container, so I'd say well worth it. That's another thing about the non-linear open world approach. Sure, you'll get your ass kicked if you try doing areas early, but you could also go stealth mode to hunt for treasures. You're able to end up with a huge life bar and plenty of weapon upgrades before doing a single dungeon if that's what you're into. As for the dungeons themselves, they're inoffensive at the best of times and annoying at the worst. They tend to be really pick-a-pipey, which sucks. I get this term from Mario Maker. It refers to a level where you're presented with two pipes, where one leads to death and the other one leads to where you're actually supposed to go to finish the level. What I mean by that here is oftentimes you'll be presented with two or more doors. One of them is the right path, one of them is a dead end, and you just have to blindly pick one. Sometimes there's a third option, which is actually intended to be a shortcut to get out of the dungeon, because finishing a boss in this game doesn't warp you out, but they're not telegraphed at all, and they're all one-way doors. They did this so you wouldn't have a straight line to the boss as soon as you walked in, but it's frustrating to have to keep retracing your steps because you picked the wrong random door. A lot of times I found myself going in circles because I kept accidentally taking the shortcut routes. It's nice to have once you beat a boss, for sure, just so you don't die a stupid death after already finishing the area, but I'd say the trade-off wasn't worth it, and they definitely could have done this a lot more elegantly. It's nothing game-ruining because the dungeons are small enough that it never really takes long to get back to where you were, but it's still hack bullshit design. There's few in the way of puzzles, but there's one in particular I have a bone to pick with. Literally. So we're at this gap, right? On the other side is a skull mounted to the wall with arrows sticking out. If you've played any Zelda, you know in about 0.2 seconds that you're supposed to shoot this skull with your bow, but I do this and nothing happens. So I then thought that this wasn't what I was supposed to do, only to bash my head up against a wall attempting to figure out how to progress, walking around this dungeon in circles. Eventually, I looked up a long play only to find out that you are supposed to shoot it with arrows. The game is just weirdly particular about where you have to stand. Look, even when I know what to do, it keeps missing. Oh, come on. Like, this doesn't count? This doesn't count? There we go, finally. Dragon View is a simple game, but I'm a simple man and thought it was pretty good. It's easy enough, my playthrough clocked in at 14:21. It's easy to understand, low maintenance, low stakes, has a cool 3D overworld, so if you get a kick out of seeing old hardware tackle something that it's not technologically known for, or if you've ever played Draken and wished that you could understand any of what's going on, then give Dragon View a look, I guess. Unfortunately, the limited run reissue I bought is long sold out, so it's probably not any easier to find than an original copy, but you know how it is. If there's a will, there's a way. The final boss is a joke if you stick to ranged attacks, and after you kill him, you save the girl and live happily ever after. Thank you so much for watching whatever the hell this video ended up being. What happened was, I've known for a long time that I've wanted to do Dragon View as my 50th episode, but I started playing the game and realized pretty quickly that I didn't have a lot to say about this game. And I really didn't want episode 50 to be 10 minutes, so I thought of some other segments to throw in there. Hopefully they were entertaining, hopefully they were worthwhile. So, whether or not this is the first episode you've watched, or you've seen all of them, or if you've been subscribed to me for years, shout out to Rumpelstiltskin, who was like one of the first 5 people subscribed to my channel and he still watches. You rule, man, if you see this. Whether or not it's your first or your 50th episode you've seen, shout out to you, the viewer, for watching. You know, it's cliche, but like, you make it happen. Thank you so much for 8,000 subscribers. We just passed that. That's crazy. We're getting into like real YouTuber numbers. Well, not like real as in I'm going to go outside and get like recognized in public or whatever, but real in the sense that if I show somebody my YouTube channel, they're not like laughing at me. I don't know. It's a respectable number, I guess. As always, shout out to the patrons. Shout out to William Robert Lee. Thank you so much, you guys. Remember, never trust anyone who needs a haircut. Not saying that I do. Goodbye.